Broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is Wilms Front, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome to the midweek edition of Wilms Front. The date is Wednesday the 1st of July 2020. It is just after 6:30 p.m. here in Melbourne. We are live on the Wilms Front YouTube channel. You can interact with the show on Entropy. To access the interface, I've put the link in the live chat and also in the description. You can ask myself or my guest tonight questions. We are also simulcast on DLive TV. I have a very special featured guest for this week, another Brit, the ever colourful and fearless Katie Hopkins. Welcome to Wilms Front.
Thank you very much for having me on. I don't know if we're allowed to say that I'm colourful these days, are we? That might be racist in itself.
Yes, there's lots of synonyms in the English language. I should have come up with another. Now, when we first teed this interview up, it was Friday the 19th of June, and it was 1 a.m. Australian time, or which would have been on the Saturday. And so I went to bed and then woke up the next day that you'd been permanently banned on Twitter. You'd had over 1 million followers there and had been retweeted by President Trump, which it was pretty sensational, the headlines the next day. Everyone thought that you'd been silenced, but you're back more than ever. You've already got back a quarter of your followers on Parler now.
Yes, thank you very much for that. So yes, Twitter removed me from their platform. I think we can all agree there is no point looking for rhyme or reason why that happens. The only thing that we have in common if we're removed is that we had influence, for good or bad, but we had influence with a large number of people. And as we head towards the November elections in America, so we will see voices of influence removed from Twitter, YouTube, as we're seeing now, and other platforms as the Democrats and those who fund them step up their efforts to get rid of Trump as president. And so I see myself as almost as a side story to that. The real story here is that the Democrats will stop at nothing to remove President Trump.
And you've never cared what people think of you. In fact, your Twitter bio, you owned all of the insults against you. You described yourself as the biggest bitch in Britain, Milo's mum, the female Farage, and Ellen DeGeneres.
Yes, and that worked better actually so I had quite extreme brain surgery. I mean, brain surgery is extreme, but mine was quite extreme. My scar went from the top of one ear all the way over to the top of another ear. And so I had to have my head shaved. So for a long time there, I had short hair. And through that phase, people likened me, because Americans struggle with short hair on a female, and they assume you're a lesbian, which is no problem either way. I'm married, and I have a husband, but that's fine. But because I had that sort of short-haired, maybe she's a lesbian thing, people thought I was angry Ellen DeGeneres. So that comparison, and Milo's mum. So I had bright white, short hair, some kind of midlife crisis, I suspect. And because of that, people thought I looked like Milo's mum. So those were those references that don't make as much sense now that I have a little bit more hair back.
Well, you still use formerly on your Twitter and on your Parler profile picture, you with short hair and pink hair as well, which dyed hair, it reeks of SJWism as well. I don't think it's as bad as blue dyed hair.
Yes, I know. I keep it there because that was a time in my life that was fundamental to me. I was cured of epilepsy, and there was a time when I had horribly shaven hair, a massive scar. And one day my radio producer said to me, "Oh, for God's sake, she was an Australian actually, and she said, pull yourself together. You're not having chemotherapy. You need to get a grip." And so I went out, had my hair dyed white and then pink, and started to get a grip of myself. And so that photo means something to me. And I like the fact that it annoys the trans lobby because I look like a lesbian. It annoys the LGBT massive because people mistake me for a lesbian. And of course, the right on LGBT people don't want me anywhere near them. So there's all sorts of reasons I like it. Conservatives are always telling me, change your photo. You look much better now. You look younger now. But I quite like that phase of my life. It was a kind of a rebirth of the Hopkins.
Now, you've been completely deplatformed by your native British mainstream media, despite for over a decade you were a darling of them, but you found a new home here in the Australian media, appearing now regularly on Sky News Outsiders program, on the Today Show with Karl Stefanovic. You can add Wilms front to that list tonight. And I remember when you first appeared on 60 Minutes Australia, which was also with Karl, there was mass outrage on Australian Twitter that Karl was speaking to you, and Paul Barry, the host of our ABC Media Watch program, he wagged his finger at Channel 9 and then Sky News Outsiders, saying you shouldn't give Katie Hopkins a platform. So apparently now that if you do interview Katie Hopkins, there's an interview disclaimer you have to read at the beginning, which is, I support all of Katie Hopkins' views and then some more. That's my disclaimer.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you for saying that. That's very, very sweet of you. Yes, so Karl has been amazing and understands me and understands that we can laugh and say our own truths without requiring that anyone else believes them. We're just sharing our opinion. And I'm very grateful to Rowan and his team there on Outsiders. They've been so kind to have me on, because it really takes courage to have me on. You can lose your job, you can lose your advertisers for sure, you can be forced out. So Rowan, Rita and the rest of them are really making a stand there, and I'm really grateful, and to yourself. Basically, if you have me on, you're risking yourself in some way. There will be criticism you will get very unkind attacks on you because you have me on your show. And I guess the biggest question mark over all of that is, I'm a mum, my husband is in the other room, my son is in another room, his English comprehension test that I've set him. You know, I am very, very normal and very, very ordinary, but somehow the media needs you to believe I'm a monster in order that you don't believe a single word that I say.
Well, you were an ordinary person until 2006, when you first appeared on the British box in the UK version of The Apprentice, and you were such a hit that you became a regular panelist on the UK chat show circuit and a few other reality TV shows, and then were employed by both the Sun and the Daily Mail newspapers to provide political, pop culture, and lifestyle commentary. So they clearly at the time thought that there was a lot of. I watched one of your the episodes of your shows, Katie Hopkins Rules the World, where If Only, where one of the panelists challenged that people such as yourself had no talent and were just famous for being famous. But there's heaps of people that go on reality TV shows today and then forgotten about a month later, but not you.
No, and that's kind of you, thank you. But I suppose I don't think my ordinariness is built out of stuff that I really, really believe in. So my ordinariness is built out of, you know, a lifetime of wanting to fight for my country. I went from university, where I was sponsored by the Intelligence Corps, to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. And I passed out of the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst and was offered a 35-year regular commission with the British Intelligence Corps. I then went into industry. Because of my epilepsy, I had to leave the military. And I spent 5 years working in the East Village on Madison Avenue for large management consultancy firms across America. And so I think there's a lot of me that was that made me a decent, ordinary person much prior to ever setting foot onto a TV screen. And I think that's why I have endured and why I will endure, is because I'm not really interested in myself. I'm not really interested in my story that much. I'm much more interested in fighting for my country. And as that stands, that means getting Trump back into the White House. And it means providing some kind of hope for Brits and others, Australians, South Africans, other decent people who are patriots, who are nationalist in the sense that they're proud of the nation they belong to, but feel that they no longer have a voice.
I first became aware of the alarming consequences in Britain of multiculturalism, Islamism, appeasement, and mass migrations in the early 2010s. And speaking out on those concerns was it was already highly illegal during that time. And when I started to hear quotes from you, I was thinking to myself, well, it's refreshing, but how are you getting away with this? How are you not hauled before one of those hate tribunals or whatever they're called? I know that was the most infamous act in Britain is the Public Order Act. But obviously it seems that in the end you were on borrowed time for quite a while.
Yes, absolutely. And those attacks over the last 12 or 15 years have just increased. So as a Sun columnist, I was arrested by the Metropolitan Police and Crime Commission. These are the people that deal with the most serious offences in the country. They tasked the homicide squad to bring me in for questioning for a column in a newspaper. That case was referred to the prosecution to hope to prosecute me for hate speech for saying that we needed to stop the boats. A reference, of course, to Australian policy. And I said that I would use gunships to stop the boats. And that was investigated. They tried to get me for that. After that, there have been a number of times where police have been involved in my life. I was one of the first in the media to acknowledge that behind the rape squads, men targeting our white girls were majority Pakistani Muslim men. Because I said that, I was brought in front of Manchester police. But of course, that's turned out to be factually correct. Of course, they come for your house. Repeat litigation against me, means that eventually they took my family home. They come for your head. A couple of jihadis tried to chop my head off. They're now in prison. And they come for my children. So they report my children to social services in the hope that social services will come and take my children. And in fact, each time social services have to check that my children are okay, which seems a great pity because there are children out there who need those helpful people, but that isn't mine. So yes, in terms of the scale of the attack, police, lawfare, physical attack, and coming for my family and taking my family home. But still, I endure and I haven't gone away. And I think if they've learned nothing, they've learned that I'm pretty hard to shut up.
And you've never played victim either. You've brushed it all off and kept going.
Yeah, I think we have to own these things. You know, I have no sympathy for myself because I chose to put myself out there. And even when I saw the price that would cost me, not only in terms of every job I've ever had, but eventually my family home and other, I still continue. So that's my choice, isn't it? And I also say to people, you know, people who are in the early phases of this, or celebrities who are crying because someone said they look fat or they weren't as pretty as they could be, or maybe they didn't like this picture or that picture. You know, you have a choice. You put yourself out there. If you don't like what people say, you can choose to stay offline, sit at home on your sofa and be quiet. And I guess my question to any young people watching this is, if you put something out there, be it a photo or a comment, is the only thing that you're going to accept people being nice to you? is the only thing that, the only opinion you will acknowledge is someone saying kind stuff, because life isn't like that. Life is tough and hard, and we all think things, and people should be allowed to say them, even if that's deeply offensive about me, about my nose, about the fact that I look a bit like a horse, whatever it is. That's okay, because I choose to put myself out here.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because if you put yourself out there, there's obviously going to be people who like you, and that's reflected in, well, not just your Twitter following, but now your Parler following as well. But there's going to be a whole bunch of people that hate you as well, and it's how you react to that as well. And we see too many in the mainstream media wallow that, or who are quite opinionated themselves, who they criticize not just people in the spotlight, but other types of people as well, and then they get really hurt and play victim when somebody fires back at them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they always are assertive with their opinions. They swim downstream with what is the accepted narrative. So typically they only receive plaudits and applause and people upvoting or echoing or retweeting their comments. But the moment they receive any kind of pushback that people disagree with them, that's when they say, oh, I've received death threats and everything. You know, and I don't laugh, because it's not nice, and I understand why people feel aggrieved. But, you know, I had a show that the British government helped fund. It was a play, or actually it was a musical, forgive me, called The Assassination of Katie Hopkins, and billboards went up around the country promoting that musical. So in a way, there's part of me that giggles, because when people say, well, I've received a death threat on social media, and I think, yeah, get over yourself. I had a whole musical about my death on billboards around the country. So yeah, look, it's tough, but what I would say is a positive, because there's so many positives that we miss, is that the support I receive, both online, on email, and in the street, is really, really lovely, and sometimes overwhelming, and so kind. People stop their cars to stop and say, keep doing what you do, keep saying what you say, keep going. And I get those emails every day, and that really makes a difference, actually. The support of people in the street really makes a difference.
Yeah, that's exactly what keeps you going. And I saw you share on Parler before a message that you got from a young fan.
Yeah, I try and remind, it's a way of also reminding people. It's not that I want the compliment for me. It's a way of reminding people, particularly conservatives, that some of our biggest support and our biggest audience actually comes from young people. So aged, I would say, probably 13 to 17, 18-year-olds. That is a massive support audience, and an audience that really needs us. And certainly when I did have my own successful radio show on LBC before I was removed, my biggest audience were that age group. Now, bear in mind, this was a Sunday morning radio show. It was a political commentary show with phone-in, you know, the most dull show you imagine for young people ever. My biggest audience was in that young age group, and it was actually a bigger show in that age group than in other chart shows or fashionable shows. So that's my belief, is that there is hope, because young people really understand what it feels like to be silenced, and many, many of them can't speak out.
Well, speaking of talkback, why don't we go to some questions on entropy? So the first one is from Matty Rose Live. He is one of my colleagues in the Australian alt media scene. He says, hi, Katie, good to see you talking to us Aussies, but didn't you know the Unshackled is an extreme far-right extremist near-ninja media website? How will your reputation ever recover?
I'm horrified to hear that you are extreme far-right horror extremist, terrorist horror far-right. And I can only say that by being here, I will therefore look incredibly centrist. In fact, your extremist, terrorist, far-right audience find them wing, vegan. I'm virtually Greta Thunberg on here.
And we've got a question from Bieber Anti-Bullying. How much influence does Katie think the Anti-Defamation League has in getting people banned from popular platforms?
Yeah, I think a great deal now. They have a sort of coordinated system for this stuff. And I've seen it in operation, not only on myself, but with other individuals that I now help. So one of the roles I have, curiously, is helping people who are suddenly under attack, are not prepared for what it feels like. And I can be that person that can help. But essentially, it's a surrounding idea that this is their target, you, and what they do is, first of all, obviously, they organize the social media mob to come at you. Others meet with the execs inside the social media platforms. Others target people that you know or associated with, business, employers, industry, things that matter to you on that regard. And then they attack you legally. So there will always become a legal challenge, a piece of litigation that arrives on your doorstep. And then, of course, they come for you personally. So perhaps your home address will go up online. And then they also involve religious groups. So you get the Muslim Council, get them involved. They work hand in hand with the Jewish organizations, get the leader of that involved. For me to be removed from Men Online, the chief rabbi was involved. The chief rabbi sent an email to my editor. That never happened, not in the history of Men Online Daily Mail has that ever happened. So there is a systematic, coordinated attack involving every element of your life and involving significant religious organizations that have clout, power, and cash.
The catalyst for your complete deplatforming from the British mainstream media, where all these groups that you just described converged and pounced, was a tweet you put up after the Manchester arena bombing, where 22 Brits were blown up, many of them young girls who'd attended that Ariana Grande concert. You tweeted 22 dead, number rising, Schofield, that's Philip Schofield, don't you even dare, do not be part of the problem, we need a final solution, #Manchester. You later deleted that and said what you should have said was we need a lasting solution, but because you'd put those two words together, it gave them the perfect justification for completely demonizing and destroying you.
Yeah, and the learning there, I think for me, is never give them, when you're stood in front of an open goal, don't give them the ball. Now, clearly, I'm talking about a Muslim terrorist. I want a lasting solution. I typed at speed. There's a typo in the word Manchester. But I gave them an open goal, and it led to my removal from my radio show, which I loved, and eventually my column also, because the combination of the Muslim Council and the Jewish organizations who work absolutely hand in glove is enough to remove you from anything in the UK. And what I would say is that the reason I miss those things, the reason I miss my radio show isn't because I had a radio show, although I loved it. It was because on the radio, people call your show and they talk to you like a friend. They're in their kitchen, they're probably in their pajamas, they were cooking a roast dinner for the Sunday, and they would just articulate their truths so honestly. And it was like a real glimpse into the heart of the country. And that's why the show was the highest rated show on a Sunday. It was the best rated commercial radio show because it was a moment of truth, like a laser. And so my regret on that tweet is not that I necessarily wrote it, it's that it led to me being removed from my radio show, where I really gave England a better chance to air its views. And of course, I was replaced by Nigel Farage, who happily skipped into my open chair, even though he knew what happened to me. And of course, what we've just seen is him being removed in a very similar and abrupt fashion without warning or notice. And again, that station celebrating the fact that we've got our station back. It's a very, I'll say this, that station is a very tough place to work, and you have to be tough to work there, either as a woman, particularly as there are no Conservatives there now.
I was getting the impression, because you were on LBC and Nigel Farage was, that it was sort of like the 2GB of the UK. I'm not sure how familiar you are with our radio stations now, but obviously I was wrong in that regard.
Yes, and I know what you're referring to in terms of the station. There is a massive, massive opportunity for a commercial radio station here on a accessible in a normal radio format for Conservative radio, and we don't have it. Many of your listeners or viewers might be unaware, but we had Fox News taken from our TVs in the UK because it was inappropriate viewing for British people. I mean, in terms of down the road of China, we are well down the road headed towards China in terms of censorship.
Well, we still get Fox News beamed into our screens, and contrary to what some of the perception is about our Sky News, it's much better than your Sky News in the UK. But Sky News After Dark, that's where most of the Conservatives have their shows, apart from Outsiders on a Sunday morning. But Sky News is straight news in the daytime. It's, I would say, hardly indistinguishable from the rest of the mainstream media at times.
Yeah, but absolutely.
6 hours every weeknight of non-leftist news is better than, well, what the UK's got. Nothing. Yeah, we have zero in terms of Conservative outlets, and even in terms of balance, I would say we have zero. And I guess, having come from the inside on this, I can see how there remain a few voices. So there is a radio station which suggests it's Conservative, but I know well, in order to stay on the air, in order to not be banned, in order to stay with an audience, they are now operating within such a small window of things they're allowed to say. You know, the Overton window is so small that actually it's almost a game. It's a bit like Tucker Carlson on Fox or Sean Hannity. Whilst they still have a platform, it's only just. And the level of nervousness around their teams, their producers are treading on eggshells. Everything has to be approved. You know, in order to, if you were, I'm banned from Fox because obviously I'm a far-right extremist, terrorist, Nazi far-right terrorist. But if you are a contributor, you have to write down what you're going to say before you're allowed on the air. If you deviate from what you said you would say, you're never invited back. So the level of control around what gives the appearance of being free speech, it is nothing of the sort. And just on that, I had no idea what you were going to say tonight, and I wasn't bothered one bit.
Yes, and that would be completely different to an experience were I to still be allowed on, let's just say, a BBC station. There would be 3 or 4 rounds of briefings with producers in order to agree what was being said, in order to agree what was not acceptable to say, and possibly now even a conversation with the legal team to just reinforce what is outside the permissible things to say. That's going on behind the scenes that viewers on their sofas aren't necessarily aware of.
It seemed that the British media was more outraged by your tweet in reaction to the Manchester Arena bombing than the continued Islamist terror attacks. There's now been 2 Islamist attacks on the London Bridge, and terrorism has resumed post the coronavirus lockdown. There was the Reading stabbing attack. 3 died, but it's only through people such as yourself and other dissident commentators that it was actually a gay hate crime. And that doesn't seem to have been picked up much because the attacker was Islamic. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'll try and make this the short version. I'm sure many of your viewers and listeners will be aware. And I do love a model, as we've seen. So I'm going to use my driving license and a debit card to demonstrate.
Don't show the any identifying features there.
Let's swap it over for this other card. Don't worry. But my point is, if there's two things that the left have to choose between, they have to choose between being very, very tolerant of Islam. They also want to seem to be very, very tolerant of LGBT. But at a certain point, they can't be tolerant of both those things, because Islam is an intolerant religion. And that's exactly what's happened with this hideous attack on the LGBT community in Reading in broad daylight. They put it as 3 gentlemen were stabbed. Actually, one of those gentlemen was more or less beheaded in part of this attack. And no one will talk about it because the attacker was Muslim, because it was a hate crime against the LGBT community. This was a large group of largely gay men sitting together. And no one will speak of it because Labour, the left, need the Muslim vote. So they have to choose. And the people that they will choose to throw under the bus, literally, or off the top of a building, literally, will be the LGBT community. And that will come to a head in the next 5 years, because by 2030, births to Muslims outnumber births to all others in the UK. And if you look at the demographic of most of our primary schools now, we are truly outnumbered. I am a white minority in London, Luton, Bradford, Leicester. How much longer does the LGBT community think it's got left in the UK? Because that clock is ticking, you know, and the sands of time are running very fast now.
I think the Australian progressives, they haven't made up their mind which side they're going to choose left. They have got a bit more time than the UK. We're not quite at UK levels of diversity yet, but we had the same-sex marriage postal survey, it was called, in 2017, and the results were broken down by electorates, and the areas with the highest no votes were in Western Sydney and in northwest and southeast Melbourne. And, well, I think you know the correlation I'm going to make.
Yes, absolutely. And it's probably easier for me to articulate it than you, which is, you know, diversity. Number one, diversity doesn't exist. There is no such thing as multiculturalism. There is only cultures living in the same space that do not mix, do not integrate. In our country and yours, we have the Somali quarter, the Eritrean quarter. There's the Eastern European area, and then there's the Afghan-Syrian quarter. You know, this is not multiculturalism. Second up, when Muslims take over a city, as they have done in Leicester, that is the only diversity. You know, my question to these people is, what happened to diversity when there are no white people left? How is it only Muslims that can be diverse? And I think finally, yes, there's absolutely this correlation between a Muslim community that come into our country, have no wish to integrate, and in fact are utterly dismissive of Western values, that teach in the mosque that are using a lollipop. And I've sat through this and watched this happen in Finland as well. The most, you know, the typical image of Finland is a white kid with blonde hair being vaguely Icelandic or Swedish or Finnish. They use a lollipop and they show it uncovered, and the lollipop is covered in flies. And that's how they teach men to think of our white girls as trash, as uncovered, as dirty, that anybody can use. That's what's going on in my country. We are being taken over, and as we're taken over, this community is anti-LGBT. They have been outside our schools on trailers with loudspeakers saying it's not okay to be gay. That's what they teach their kids. I don't mind actually what their opinion is on that. What I think is concerning is that the actions behind that mean that gay men are beheaded in a British park in the middle of a day, and no one will talk about it and no one will be honest about it.
Well, even now, there's still hardly any media attention in the UK. Well, you call them the rape gangs. I'm not sure if we're still on YouTube. I'm not sure if we're allowed to say that. They're known as the grooming gangs. There's
Grooming
been
gang.
a report done by the government, but it's suppressed. But these grooming attacks on young white British girls, they're still happening. They're still in operation. Some have been imprisoned, but it certainly hasn't ended.
Oh no, and you can imagine a lot of the stuff that I am fed, you know, in confidence comes from people who work with child protection. We're just about to hear of another city where the mass rape of our young white girls has been happening over the last few years, and that's just about to break on media, but of course it will be played down. And for people that are unaware of these gangs, they are essentially gangs of majority Pakistani Muslim men. They are very clever, they are systematically organized, they are coordinated, and they are networked. And they are very, very good at being able to hook in our British girls, bring them into these networks where they are then used by these men and they are passed around from different groups. And you might say, how does that happen? That couldn't happen to my daughter. That could never happen to my family. And I've spoken to many, many young girls and families just like me. And it does happen because they are clever, clever, clever at how they do this stuff. So that's happening every single day in the UK and has been covered up because police know that in order to progress and climb the greasy pole, you have to be non-racist, you have to not call out the awkward issues, and grooming gangs, of course, are at the apex of the most awkward of issues because Muslims will have the power here in the UK very soon.
It's an incredibly sad and sick development. And you wonder, these police and these child protection, how can they look at themselves and go to work every day and be complicit of this? And I know what you mean when you talk about, you've spoken to some of the victims and their families. I heard a story recently, and it doesn't hit you until you hear a first-hand account.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably, you know, just before I was removed from my radio show, not wishing to bang on about that, but the thing that strikes me always is some of those conversations, those were the last conversations that I had on the air just prior to being removed, were super powerful. Young girls from regular, you know, smart, middle-class families saying what happened to them. And I think that was probably part of my removal as well, is that was really big radio at the time. So anyway, the point is those are really impactful stories. This is happening every day in the UK. And the few of us that are able to or have already lost everything they can take from us, which is myself and a couple of others, you know, we have the responsibility to keep helping to educate in as open a way as we can about what's going on here.
Now, getting you deplatformed from the British mainstream media, of course, that was never going to be enough because you still, well, you had your Twitter following of 1 million people, and you temporarily got suspended in January this year, which it was coincidentally at the same time after you'd been presented with a fake award by a South African YouTuber, Josh Peters, the campaign to unify the nation trophy. So it seemed that it was just a coincidence that you were denied a right of reply at that time when he was going around gloating about how he'd got you to go to Prague to present you with this award and did the media tour.
Yeah, and I guess my challenge to Josh, or whatever he's called, is hey, how about you take that speech that I gave at your event and you put it up on YouTube, let people hear it, because actually I'm quite proud of it. I was invited to an event for something that's so dear to my heart, which is as I see it, the genocide of white farmers in South Africa. And I was told that this would be really to benefit the white farmers, to be supportive of them, to let them know that someone was speaking for them, all the things that I care most about. And I went and gave that speech. my observation in hindsight is that that was a very sophisticated and well-funded operation. I'd love to see the funding behind it. I'd love that speech to be put up. And even in the darkest moments, because as you can imagine, having been tricked for something that you love and then be humiliated and then be removed from Twitter, and that all happened on one weekend, I am still human, even though I'm a complete cow and the biggest bitch in Britain and seem very hard-nosed and thick-skinned. My hurt from that was that I really care for South Africans. You know, my focus this morning has been working with a white South African farmer and his family who fought off attackers in the night. So that's the backstory to it. And when I look at it and I try and learn lessons from it, I suppose my learning is that I did what I was asked to do. I'm proud of the speech that I gave. I turned up on time. I was polite to the waiters and the hotel staff, polite to everybody in the room. As part of the ruse against me, they said that the father who was supposed to be hosting this was ill. I offered to go and visit the father who was ill, and I offered to go and bring him Lucozade and grapes if he needed it. So that was all a lie to trick me. But when I look back, did I do everything I said I'd do? And did I do it to the standard that I would want to know that I did it? Yes, I did. Did he use me for other purposes? Yes. But I guess he needs to own that.
Josh Peters, he's South African himself. He grew up in Cape Town, which is actually one of the better areas of yes, South Africa. But interesting that he currently resides in London. And if he's worried about people inciting racial hatred, he should just look at his own homeland. And you've been to South Africa yourself. You know what it's like on the ground there.
Yes, white farmers are being hunted from their lands. And I am a woman of my word, so I put my money where my mouth is. I went and lived on white farms in South Africa for close to 3 months, touring with a cameraman to help show the world what's happening. And I can tell you, sleeping on a white farm is a frightening thing. And I'm not frightened by a lot. You know, in the night is when the monsters come, black gangs come. And they don't just come to steal, they tie up their victims with wire, they shoot them, they stab them. We've just had another case where a gentleman had boiling water poured across him. I can't, you know, the detail is horrific, but that's really where my heart is. And it's interesting that whoever this boy is, he chooses not to live in that country. And I suppose my challenge to him, he can bring his camera team, I'd welcome it, is come with me to Pretoria, come with me to the white farms, come and show how clever you are for those farmers who have seen their husband stabbed to death. That's the reality of it. Interestingly, I did bump into Joshua, whatever, the other day, and I was undercover, joining the Black Lives Matter protesters to better understand them. And he spotted me before the protest, and it turns out he lives in one of the very, very fanciest bits of New Money London. I'm assuming his daddy or someone paid for him to have a flat there. And he came up to me to try to talk to me, to ask me if didn't I find the whole thing very funny indeed. So I politely asked him to remove himself, and that I had no wish to speak to him.
There was shared on, it's going around on Telegram, the messaging app. I'm not sure if you've spent any time on it. This footage from what purports to be a farm attack victim. I won't go into it, but it's extremely horrific. A lot of people have replied, please don't share this here. But it's sadly, it's what is going on there, and torture and pouring boiling water on people. It looks horrific, and that is what's happening. It's unpleasant to see, but sadly, it's the truth.
Yeah, I know the footage you're referring to. I was sent it a while back. I chose not to share it yet because it's so disturbing. But certainly, you know, I've sat with, let's just go to a gentleman, Bernard. These farmers aren't rich. All they have is the land that their grandfathers changed from bushveld into farm. He arrived home one Sunday with his father in the car. and there was a gang waiting for him in his garage. They strung up Bernard with fencing wire. They bludgeoned his father to death in the bathroom. And then Bernard, as he lay there in his own blood, heard the car that brought his wife and children home, with the worst sound you could ever hear, I'm sure, when you know there's a gang waiting for them. The children ran out of the car. The black gang fired at one of the children and then strung up the wife with wire. And the other children watched as the parents were beaten and brutalized. So the grandfather died. And of course, it's not just the attack that is the lasting damage. The 11-year-old son has tried to commit suicide because he wants to be with his granddad and believes that bullet was meant for him. And the other son has been asked to leave school because he's now a violent boy and he can't sleep. That's just one family with whom I spent time in South Africa, and that's the real honest truth of it. But because the farmers are white, the world looks the other way. And in my lifetime, our lifetime, we will not have any more whites left in South Africa. They will be genocided from the land and no one will have said a word.
There was a bit of mainstream media interest in Australia for a while, but it's dissolved now. But that doesn't mean that the white genocide has stopped in South Africa. It's still continuing. And this is the old thing. Just because the mainstream media doesn't report on it doesn't mean it's not happening.
No, and I suppose the harder thing is seeing someone say, well, I worked in the health service and I didn't receive the personal protection I should have had, and therefore that's racist. Or I had this and the police didn't come within 2 hours. It's because I'm black and that's racist. And those are seen as the most significant moments of our day. Pull down that statue because it might be racist. Whereas right now in South Africa, whites are being hunted, tortured, burnt with blowtorches, and various other horrendous things that they do to these children and women in front of their husbands. That's happening now to white people, but they're the wrong colour. So yes, I saw that Australia had spoken about possibly offering asylum, refuge, farmlands to these brilliant farmers, but that was quickly beaten out of Australia as seen as being kind of racist or right wing or whatever it was, whatever the crime of trying to help white farmers would be.
Yes, it was a combination of those accusations that you just described. Let's turn our attention to that's the main defining event of 2020, the coronavirus pandemic. And I noticed that the far left progressives, they'd spent the second half of 2019 with Extinction Rebellion. They were running rampant in London, blocking traffic and vandalizing a whole bunch of properties. And the same thing with the blocking of traffic, gluing themselves to road was happening here in Australia. And they were very upset at the beginning of the pandemic because it destroyed climate and Greta Inc., as I call it. But they quickly learned to love the lockdown and became its biggest defenders, I think, because it was another way for them to destroy the economy and capitalism, have a bigger government, and of course the cult of the NHS, as it's known, the lovely socialised healthcare system of the UK, the nurses saving all those coronavirus sufferers. They were so busy that they had time to make so many TikTok dancing choreographed videos.
Yeah, absolutely. The Green mafia saw another way around this, which was, right, let's destroy the economy. And then when it comes to the rebuild, we can demand that we only rebuild along green lines. And so they kind of regrouped around that. My personal opinion is that coronavirus, whilst being real, clearly there is a virus. My view, it's never been that much more harmful than flu. I believe it was a man-made event released strategically at a time of mass gathering. My personal opinion is that the lockdown will be and is the greatest hoax in human history. And I do subscribe to the notion that this is part of a wider strategic play for some reordering where we are all vaccinated, all tracked, all traceable, and all monitored. So that puts me out there in the crazy fields of conspiracy theories. But I think even if you go for a more moderate interpretation, that perhaps lockdown wasn't necessary, or not at the cost of destroying our economies. There are obvious things, aren't there? Like, how can you have 20,000 people having a protest, literally skin to skin, and there not be any issue with that? There's more obvious things that are more tangible than perhaps my seemingly wacky ideas that this is part of a global reprogramming, which is what I believe Corona is.
The lockdown lovies, as I called them, that mob decided for themselves when lockdown was over in the UK and in Australia. Obviously, it was triggered over in the US with the death of George Floyd, and I call it the new extreme Black Lives Matter 2.0, and it spread to the UK, even though the UK police, they don't really go around shooting non-whites. They tend to just bust your door down if you've said something mean on the internet.
That's true.
I think it was Paul Joseph Watson who said that there was only one black man who died at the hands of the UK police last year, and that was the second London Bridge attacker.
You'd be right. And I think with the corona, what it brought out was this thing that's in human nature, and it's ugly, and it makes those experiments back in the 1960s where, if a guy was told to torture someone else, he would, if it was given instruction to do so. That really has felt very present here in the UK. People's love of this idea of rules, of being told what to do, of having responsibility and accountability removed away from them, of being paid a monthly wage to sit at home and essentially do nothing, to adhere to the state in everything, and to become therefore sort of advocates of what the state has to say and miniature police forces in and of themselves. And I've seen that with some of my own family members, which is really distressing. People who will call out other people for not behaving in a way they think is suitable, or not wearing a mask in the way that they think is appropriate, or not distancing how they should, or not following the one-way system. The weirdness of watching people enjoy rules and becoming enforcers of rules that make no sense whatsoever has really been an insight into the darkness of humanity. And it's not great, but you do see how, people say it's September the 1st, 1939. You see how that happened. You see how the cult of belonging can happen. And it's happening now. We had British people. I don't think Australia went for this, but I think it was Thursday at 8 p.m, the British people gathered on their front doorsteps to clap at the sky. Now, the idea of it was you were clapping in support of the cult of the NHS, socialised healthcare. But the reality of it was sane people stood on their doorsteps and filmed themselves clapping at the sky. Who knew that could happen in an age of intelligence?
And the UK's snitch hotlines, they were also in meltdown as well. My home state of Victoria, that won the state of origin in terms of calls to the snitch line, and also the amount of fines given out by our local police. And it turns out now it's all for nothing, because we've got the second wave outbreak in our northwestern suburbs, which has I mentioned the northwestern Melbourne before, has the same demographics as that other city you mentioned, Leicester, which is going into a second lockdown.
Yes, absolutely. So we have locked down Leicester. Now, one of the funny things of this, so lightening the tone slightly, is that I can't stand Leicester. I think it's disgusting. I think it's the dustbin of the UK. Well, there's Leicester, Bradford, Luton, Tower Hamlets, Newham. I could go on. all of these places ought to be locked down forever. In fact, if they were provided with some sort of security perimeter and they were absolutely just closed in on themselves and never allowed out, that would suit me perfectly and actually would improve my country. But yeah, Leicester, nobody's allowed to say why. No one's allowed to say that it is a majority Muslim population in these zones, although it is. No one's allowed to acknowledge the fact that whites are a minority in these places, which they are. And so it's like watching the mainstream media try and, I've made the analogy, it's like watching a snake trying to shed its skin, sort of tying themselves in knots so that they don't mention the obvious elephant in the room, but they talk about anything else. But I think more generally, and in a more, my opinion sense, is that we were always programmed to accept a second wave. After all, what makes a first wave more credible than to already have you ready and not acknowledging a second wave? So I don't, again, for my money, I don't buy into any of this. Second wave, maybe, but it's a flu. It doesn't kill many people. It kills people who are vulnerable anyway. And clearly that's a controversial opinion, but it's one that I think is absolutely accurate.
I feel the same way about the northwest of Melbourne. I'd be happy for that area of Melbourne to be locked up for good, because I'm down in the one of the southernmost suburban areas, Frankston, which it's often been mocked by our comedians, referred to as Bougainville in the literal Bogan Australian sense. But do you know how many active cases we've had in Frankston the past week?
No.
Zero.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it. I mean, my favorite people are people, very much like myself. But I mean, I don't mean that in terms of color or sexuality or any of the ridiculous things. Just regular people, normal people who want to go to work and come home, people who want their family to be okay, people who want to try and stay healthy and do their best, but have 18 beers on the weekend if they feel like it. People who want to make bad decisions sometimes, but own the consequences of it. Regular people, my kind of people, bogans, deplorables, salt of the earth. And that's really, to me, what this thing that I belong to, whatever that is, that's what we are. We are the salt of the earth people. We don't ask anyone for anything. We don't expect anything from anyone. And we own our own issues. And I know that that's really strong. And I guess one of my sort of positive messages that I like to bang on about, because I think it really matters right now, is that people feel very lonely. And the important thing to know is that you're not on your own. And no matter how much you are uninvited from something or forced off something or asked to leave your church or synagogue or not invited to a family gathering because of something you said, please know that actually you're not on your own. That there are many of us from Australia, South Africa, here in Europe as I am, but in the UK and certainly in America. And just because you can't hear us in the mainstream, we're there, and actually we're the best of us. I also think as a whole, us salt of the earth people are more funny, we have better sense of humour, we're better looking, and we've got personality. And that's something that Democrats and the left will never have.
That's probably why they've declared war on, especially classic British comedy, because the BLM 2.0, it led to, firstly the push to topple historical statues, including Winston Churchill's, but also the online wiping of classic British comedy, such as Little Britain, which Matt Lucas and David Wilms apologised for creating. I still think it's hilarious. It was huge in Australia. League of Gentlemen, the Mighty Boosh. Not only have they been wiped from our streaming services, but our major DVD retailer, JB Hi-Fi, I can't find those, and I also can't find any of Paul Hogan's shows or Crocodile Dundee movies anymore. They've all disappeared from JB Hi-Fi as well.
Craziness what they're doing. But our sense of humour is the thing that we keep with us, and in many ways that's where lockdown has been very effective at silencing voices. It's not just because of all the sort of disruption, but because we have not been able to gather in the way that we have in the past. And that's had a very significant impact for Conservatives, because when we're together in a room, it's a powerful way of reminding people that there is hope, there is optimism, and sort of sending people out the door with that sense of it's going to be all right. And that's what's been particularly frustrating for me, is I haven't been able to get amongst the crowds that I would normally get amongst to help drive us forwards. So I'm desperate to get back on the road to do just that.
It was your quoting of that famous British comedy Blackadder that got you permanently banned from Twitter. You were responding to somebody had sexually threatened you, and your response was he better be hung like a baboon, which Twitter, they decided had some sort of racial connotation. The progressives, they think more about race than us.
And we do. I know. I mean, how racist do you have to be to imagine that a baboon is in some way referring to someone of color? That's a hideously racist thing to say, and not a thought I would have had, but it's the thoughts they have. I mean, that's crazy to me. What I'm pretty happy about is that the thing that eventually was used as the excuse for getting me off Twitter and 1.1 million followers was that it was about having testicular fortitude. So I like that. I like that balls were the reason that I was removed.
It was basically you're banning a culmination of Twitter's editorializing worsening during 2020. They put up that fact check on Trump's tweets about mail-in ballots, and then they hid his tweets about basically enforcing the law, saying that that was glorifying violence, that calling in the military, that was apparently even though he's the president. And then of course his mock video about fake news was labeled manipulated media, and it was clear that Twitter was just saying, and this is a presidential election year, yeah, we don't care about our conservative users, we've picked our side.
Yeah, and that's why I sort of, if people start saying, but this wasn't against the rules, or maybe you can appeal, or maybe this, no, stop with that. There's no rationale now. There's no rules. There is only influence. If you have too much of it, you're gone. So the only way you can survive is by being not that influential. So that's not very kind, but that's just true. So yeah, that goes on. I think we need to just always keep moving forward. So that's in the past. Okay, they're going to ban Trump. They will remove Trump from Twitter before November. Fine. Move forwards. Find the new platform. Find new ways of getting us out there. That's very much my dynamic on this, is that we can sit and look at our navels all we want. That is not going to get us moving forwards. We have to move forwards, and we have to keep letting this stuff fall away from us and rebuilding. And that's why I'll be working hard with Parley, on Parley, supporting the Parley team as they try and do that, because they have not picked an easy road. The gentleman behind that service, he didn't just do that because he thought, oh, this will be easy. I'll set up an online platform that will have no censorship. That's difficult. And I think my job, as I see it, is to support people like yourself, like Rowan and the team, that do the difficult thing right now, which is give both sides a view. I'm not interested in just my opinion at all. Anybody that will give both sides a view, I think, is really important. Our job is to move forwards. Don't dwell on what's been done to you. Get out and find how we take our message to people who are open to hearing our message.
We've got a super chat on that topic from Origin Adamandus for $10 US. Thank you so much. Since your successful move to Parler, have you had any contact from John Mates, founder of Parler? If so, have there been positive communications?
Oh, bless. Yeah, of course. So John and I chatted as I was being set up. We had to sort an issue where someone had pretended to be me, set up an account that Mail Online published as if it was me. It wasn't me. So we had to resolve that. But yes, John has been really welcoming. And I guess in return, what I'm trying to do is support John and the team And I guess a little bit of a plea from my side. I say sides, it's not like a child's football match, but what I mean is a plea for supportiveness within my own teams, is that what we do worst perhaps is pull each other apart. There's a lot of ego in the world of online. I think the boys spend a lot of time in studios. My choice is to be on the road. And I think what we need to do is support each other and spend less time criticizing people that are trying to help put our message across. And so that's really where I come at from Parler and try, that's the sort of messaging I'm trying to push through. But certainly, yes, absolutely in conversation with John, absolutely there to support him, and have found him I find him to be admirable and brave. And that's what I'm trying to get across to him.
Bieber Anti-Bullying has got another question. Why did you go to Parler, a platform that verifies users' identities, instead of just going to Gab, which I'm sure you've heard of Gab before? Andrew Torber is the founder and CEO of it.
Yes, and I've been in conversation with Andrew a lot. He's very kindly been very supportive, always offering a platform. And it's not that I am not supportive of Gab, not at all, but there needs to be a choice made. And I think actually it happened almost by chance, because there was an account that was being assumed to be me that wasn't me. I ended up being there to correct that. I have no strong feelings about this, other than Parlay is somewhere I think being able to be verified is a good thing. I think it's useful, but maybe that's because I'm swayed, because I believe you have to be accountable for what happens to you. And maybe that's easier to say as someone who's had everything taken. Ultimately, arguably, I'm one of the most free people that there are, despite being in one of the most censored spots. Is that because I own nothing and have nothing? I'm probably freer than most. So I chose Parler slightly by chance. I didn't choose it over Gab, but I think as long as we're out there, our voices heard, and feel that you have somewhere you can talk, or somewhere you can find people like me and connect, then I'm always listening.
Parler also has the advantage of, for now, being on the app stores in Apple, Android. Trump seems to have a good relationship with Tim Apple, so fingers crossed that he doesn't kick Parler off. Gab has been kicked off all the apps, but it'll be interesting now that there has been this mass migration triggered pretty much by your move there. You've got 285,000 followers now. I think Laura Loomer's got the most. She's already cracked half a million. It has really taken off, a million more users, and I think Twitter and Jack Dorsey is scratching their head now, saying, "Wow, they really did leave us and find another one."
Yes, and that's something I think has been great, is that with my removal, there was an exodus, twexodus, I guess. I'm grateful to have Laura Loomer's support. I've known her for a very long time, and she is really one of the heroines in this. There aren't many females out there who are able to withstand the level of battering and still fight on. And she really has done that. She's been on that platform for a very long time, building her audience, has done very well. And I'm grateful to Laura as well. She was very helpful in setting me up on Parlay and getting me introduced to John. So Laura Loomer deserves, even if you disagree with Laura, even if you disagree with Trump, actually, just from the pure sort of values of being tenacious and never giving in and pushing forwards. Laura's been doing that for a good few years now that I've known her. So yeah, proud of her for that. I'm proud of being a trigger for an exodus. And my next ambition, of course, is to bring Trump across. I'm sure we may lose access to Apple and to the App Store, but I think if you have the 45th president on your platform, it doesn't really matter whether you're on the App Store or not, because people will come. And I think the signs are looking increasingly positive that Trump will make that move.
And Twitter's recent conduct, it's coincided with YouTube updating their terms of service, which saw Gavin McGuinness booted last week, Stefan Molyneux this week, and Facebook is facing, I call it a woke advertising revolt. Apparently there's still too much hate speech on Facebook, and so all these corporations are pulling their advertising until that's fixed. And Facebook has just introduced a new political advertising policy for this election season. What a coincidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the hypocrisy is so rife. I wonder if I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but I'm requiring, oh no, here it is. Okay, I'm going to see if, this is not very technical, I know, but let's just see what happens. Okay, you can see that on your screen, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a receipt for Facebook advert. And the reason I did that, obviously it's a very small sum of money, but is to prove that Facebook will and are still taking dollars, pounds from someone like me for an Instagram post that they have removed without telling me from my account, and they are still taking the pounds to promote a post that doesn't exist anymore from a figure they would call hate. They'll take your money. So kids know that. I don't care if they then remove my platform. It doesn't make any odds to me. Know that as of today, that's today, Facebook are taking my money to promote me at the same time as pretending to censor me. That's what's going on. Kids, you are Facebook's content. Get off that platform.
And it's happened with our Facebook page as well. They will have removed one of our posts for violating the community standards. Then the next post that says, "Oh, this post is performing better. Why don't you boost it? You just got rid of my."
Yeah. Why don't you promote this? And mine, the one that they removed but have promoted at the same time, was about the fact that I said, "Oh, I've just bought my Terrorist Lives Matter T-shirt," and this was in response to the Reading stabbings. What's the appropriate gesture for a terrorist? Do I go down on two knees? Do I bend at the waist? And that's the post that Facebook have taken my money to promote. So please know that, people. That's the stuff Facebook's prepared to promote. Anyway, I'm running down into my last few moments before I have to go. So I suppose we should either do last quick questions or anything else you want to ask.
Yep. So I want, obviously, since you've been deplatformed from your own mainstream media, have you thought about, well, you can't at the moment, migrating to Australia? For example, you'd still, I think, be able to put up a sign or banner that says all lives or white lives matter. And clearly, obviously, the outsiders, they're keen to keep having you back on. So is Karl, and I'd be happy to as well. We tend to get the dud UK celebs migrating to Australia, such as Mariam Margulies and Ben Elton, who, well, he hasn't been funny since Blackadder. So we could really use a high quality Brit like yourself to migrate here.
Yes, thank you very much for the kind offer. Can you imagine the meltdown if I said we should maybe do this. If I said I was moving or migrating to Australia, the meltdown from the leftists would be epic. Maybe we'll tease that on the next Outsiders. What I would love to do, and I've been determined to do for a long time, and then lockdown came and Australia won't let me in, but is come and do a number of speaking engagements, get out on the streets, get up to the northwest of Melbourne, get amongst some of your Somali individuals who think they have the right to terrorise Australians, to take away the things that Australians love best, and a press that is being very refuses to challenge them. I want to get to the police department there as well and ask why they don't stand up to any of this. And so I want to get on the ground in Australia, talks well to motivate brilliant freedom lovers like myself and yourself. So that will happen. The Hopkins will come to Australia, and I look forward to the anxiety that it creates among the weaker of us, which are, of course, the left.
Because we're not at UK alert levels yet, but we can't get enough words of warning. Before we wrap up, there is one more super chat from Due de Boer, who's my co-host. We do a show together, Trad Tasman Talk. He's a New Zealander, so we share what's going on in the politics of I share what's going on in the politics of Australia, and he shares what's going on in the politics of New Zealand. It used to be called Trans Tasman Talk, but the trans triggered a lot of our audience, so we changed it to Trad. His super chat is, will things get better or worse for the right once Islam purges LGBTQWRATY? He's being a bit cheeky there.
Well, commiserations for living in New Zealand, and I don't mean that in the sense of the beautiful country. I mean having Jacinda Ardern and her terrifying bill that she rushed through the New Zealand Parliament while no one was looking, basically making her Emperor of New Zealand, able to consign
I called
anyone.
it the Enabling Act. That's what I called
Oh
it.
my goodness, unbelievable. So that woman is, you know, if I had the most dangerous woman in America, Ilhan Omar. The second most dangerous woman on the planet, Jacinda Ardern. She is their dream woman, and she is implementing everything by the letter. But anywho, yes, will they get weaker? No. The left are only going to increase in power. The Islamification of politics will increase. We have de facto blasphemy now. We will have Sharia law in the UK, and it's already started in the hubs of Birmingham, Leicester. You will see it as well in northwest Melbourne and other places. It will already be in operation in those places too.
Well, it's never too late to turn the tide. New Zealand has got their election coming up as well. Dues is supportive of MAGA 2020, which is Make Ardern Go Away. That's the MAGA in New Zealand there. Hopefully soon you can come to Australia. It's been an absolute pleasure and blast to chat with you, Katie. Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, look more of your vlogs and commentary on Parler, because your vlogs are excellent. They're just 2 minutes of, and I say this in a polite way, brutal commentary in a good sense.
Yeah, I don't tiptoe around the tulips. You know, I think it, I say it, you can hear it, and at no point do I ever ask you to agree with it. And I suppose I'll leave you with my reassurance that if you ever feel alone, any of you out there, know that we are many, we stand strong, and together we can move forward past all of this. You know, agreement is never a precursor to debate. All we ever want to do is debate, but you're not on your own. I will get over there, and I will put the fear of God into the right people in Melbourne.
Can't wait. All right, good night, everybody. I'll see you next show.
See you later.